Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. We are still tracking Tropical Storm Philippe and what will become a slow moving system here in the Northeast, in New England, and Eastern Canada, right on into the beginning of next week. Also, other systems in the tropics to talk about, both in the Atlantic and on both sides of the Pacific. And these are going to impact our weather here in the coming days in the United States. So I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll take a look at what's going to be a growing threat for flooding here. Now, Philippe is still a very disorganized system. It'll be moving over or near Bermuda here later on this morning into the afternoon hours. Not really a massive wind maker, but certainly a rain maker, bands of heavy gusty rains. But this is not a system poised to strengthen into a big time hurricane. Instead, what's going to happen is it's going to transition and link up with this approaching front to its west that's moving into the eastern United States here as we head into the weekend. That front's going to be responsible for some very unsettled and chilly weather here in portions of the Great Lakes, Northeast, and Eastern Canada right on into the first part of next week. So our real first true taste of fall. But what's going to happen is with that front slowing down and moisture coming in out of Philippe, we're going to see quite a bit of rain moving into Atlantic Canada, Maine, into southeastern Canada as well with Philippe. And we're also going to see quite a bit of rain with this approaching front as it slows down and interacts with that tropical and subtropical moisture. So in the Northeast, we once again have to talk about a threat for very heavy rain, just 8 days removed from the very heavy rain that we had to deal with at the end of last week. And the pattern, unfortunately, is going to repeat itself where we've got a lot of moisture coming out of the tropics from the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico later next week, heading right up the eastern seaboard once again towards next weekend. So I would love to say we're going to snap out of this pattern, but unfortunately it does not look that way. So first we're going to focus on the tropics. Philippe is still a tropical storm, although heading into cooler waters. We are expecting Philippe to lose its tropical characteristics, and as a result, we do not have any kind of tropical storm watches or warnings for Maine or for Atlantic Canada. It does not mean we're not going to see winds of that strength. It just means that the Hurricane Center has decided to hold off on issuing those warnings. And I have kind of mixed feelings about that. As a meteorologist, I'll say technically that would be correct. We're not going to be dealing with a tropical storm tomorrow night or Sunday as it comes inland, but we are going to be dealing with a growing storm, which is going to pick up jet stream and trough energy coming in from the west. So that interaction with this trough from the west is actually going to bring a growing storm with a growing amount of rain and some wind with it. So Philippe will actually look healthier by the time it gets up into here, but it's not going to be tropical. So that's kind of the short end of a very long story. Now, currently the storm is moving to the northeast at 18 miles per hour. So it's picked up forward speed. That's going to bring it very close to Bermuda here. And I'll show you the map. Winds are 50 miles per hour. So remarkably, Philippe has not really changed intensity in the last week or so as it tracked from the central Atlantic to near the eastern islands of the Caribbean and now northward towards Bermuda. Pretty much a steady state, low to moderate end tropical storm. We do have another system that could develop here later next week into a tropical depression or storm coming off of Africa here this weekend. That is not looking like a threat to land, but the name that follows Rena, which was a brief storm last weekend, would be Sean. So this could be Tropical Storm Sean here towards the middle and second part of next week. The water vapor imagery shows us quite a bit of activity, but the only real concern on the map is Philippe at this point. And I'm going to start circling some features like I typically do. This is Philippe. So here's Bermuda right here. You can see it's actually kind of splitting the uprights between a growing non-tropical low here just to the west of Bermuda and Philippe, which is near and just to the east of Bermuda. There's wind shear coming in out of the southwest. So what that's doing is it's taking the center of Philippe, bringing it over the island, but bringing all the heavier showers and storms mainly to the east of Bermuda. So I guess some good news for Bermuda in that the strongest winds are probably going to stay east of you. Now, these two systems here, kind of a double-barreled system, are going to kind of interact with each other up in here as the system moves into cooler water. And what's going to happen is we're pretty much just going to have one surface feature kind of heading generally in this direction here with the strongest winds on the eastern side of it over western Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, far eastern Maine, and the heaviest rain on the western side of it pretty much over Maine and western New Brunswick and into southeast Quebec. We also have a pretty strong upper level feature here, diving south and eastward across the Great Lakes, bringing cooler, drier air with it, and moisture coming in out of the Pacific across the Gulf states into the southeastern U.S. So we are getting a little bit of rain down in here. But unfortunately, with this dry air push coming in into a very dry area, stronger winds and lower dew points, we also have a growing fire threat here over the next couple of days in places that just haven't gotten a lot of rain recently. So this front here is going to swing eastward. It's going to move into the northeast here tomorrow and pick up moisture coming in from here. We're just going to see a very wet pattern here for the first part of the weekend. Now, the rest of the tropics are pretty quiet. This is not a tropical feature, just a gale moving over the Azores and basically linking up with this moisture here on the southern tail. We've got a big area of high pressure east of the islands. We do have a bit of a trough, a bit of a disturbance here that doesn't look like it's going to have a chance to organize. And then here comes our next wave getting ready to come off of Africa, and that's going to head in this direction. And what's going to happen is all this dry air in place here is going to kind of get pushed away to the northwest, and we're going to see an envelope of moisture here that allows this next wave to potentially develop slowly into our next feature. But it looks like it's going to head up into this direction. So that's a big picture view here. Here's a look at the infrared. And you can see on the Pacific side, things are actually busier than the Atlantic. We do have Tropical Storm Lydia over here, pretty well organized. Let me clear this here. Sorry about that. You can see a pretty well organized central dense overcast with a center somewhere underneath it. That is heading slowly west and will take a stop and then probably try to turn back to the right here. We also have a disturbance that has not grown anymore, and that is 99E, and that could become a depression or tropical storm max by the beginning of next week, and that could be a threat here for the Mexican Riviera by the time we get into the middle part of next week. Both of these systems eventually do have the ability to turn this direction and bring moisture up into Texas in the southwest towards the middle and second part of next week, and my coming videos will talk more about that interaction. Here's a look at the Western Atlantic, non-tropical low, and then Tropical Storm Philippe, the two kind of double-barreled. Here's our front getting ready to move into the Carolinas, into the northeast. And that is going to be slowing down some here by the weekend. The infrared here, you can see Bermuda on the map right here is kind of in between both of these low pressure systems, but we do have bands of showers and storms tracking northward here. And we are expecting to see the actual center of Philippe move very close to Bermuda here towards the early part of this afternoon and then turn northwest. And by the weekend, becoming a non-tropical or post-tropical system. So no tropical storm watches or warnings are being posted right now. However, I don't know if this is necessarily the best way to deal with something like this. It may not be tropical, but it is going to bring tropical storm conditions into this portion of Maine, New Brunswick, and probably southwestern New Brunswick here. We're going to see kind of on the eastern side here an envelope of tropical storm force winds, because you see kind of this orange area that's going to clip by Bermuda here this afternoon. If you translate that north, it kind of goes in this direction, but actually grows some. So if it were me, and I'm not the Hurricane Center, and of course I advise you to kind of stick with their forecast, I would have a tropical storm watch in this area and here right now. Just because, well, it's not going to be a tropical storm at this point, it will have tropical storm conditions. So it's going to kind of mimic that tropical storm, even though it's going to be losing that tropical storm characteristic. So here are where the tropical storm force winds are possible. You can see Bermuda's got a 70% chance of tropical storm winds later today. And then as we head up into down east Maine, a 30 to 40% chance of tropical storm force winds, maybe 40 to 50 here over the southwestern tip of New Brunswick. The very same area that had Lee about a month ago is dealing with kind of similar winds here from Philippe, maybe even stronger. So we are going to see heavy rainfall affecting Bermuda here this morning, and that could produce some flash flooding, and then a move towards Atlantic Canada and New England as a post-tropical cyclone this weekend. Whether or not this system has stronger tropical storm force winds, which it could have, interests in Atlantic Canada and New England should be prepared for the possibility of strong winds and heavy rainfall, which could produce isolated to scattered instances of urban and flash flooding. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think it will cause flooding for some areas here. It's been so wet in the last couple of months. You can see that slight risk for flooding extends from eastern New York and western New England up into southeast Canada, and then trails back into northern New Hampshire, Maine, and probably New Brunswick and western Nova Scotia as well. The storm track itself is going to turn left and head north-northwest and head up towards the Gulf of Maine, with landfall expected here in 48 hours. That puts us here in early in the day on Sunday. It's not going to be tropical, but that remnant low pressure system heads to the northwest and turns left into Quebec, where it brings in colder air with it. And you can see intensity forecasts show gradual intensification to a higher end or moderate tropical storm here by Sunday morning, and then weakening beyond that. as we lose some of our jet stream dynamics. Now, the radar from Bermuda doesn't look like a tropical storm is hitting, even though it is. We just see bands of showers and storms bringing locally heavy rainfall. We could see some power outages out of these. But fortunately, this is not going to be a massive rainmaker for Bermuda. You can kind of see Bermuda right here. The heaviest rain is going to go by to your east around lunchtime today, and then things should slowly quiet down this afternoon and evening. Some wraparound showers could impact you here tonight, but most of that rain heads off to the north and east of Bermuda. And as we head to tomorrow, we see bands of rain moving into Nova Scotia towards evening, and then heading up into eastern Maine and New Brunswick here later tomorrow afternoon and especially tomorrow night. The worst of the rain should be overnight tomorrow night across down east Maine and New Brunswick. Also bands of heavy rain moving through Nova Scotia here tomorrow night. And then the heaviest of rain Sunday morning moves away into northern New Brunswick, into the Gaspé Peninsula, northwestern Maine, the St. Lawrence Valley, and not shown on here, Prince Edward Island here early on Sunday will have some heavy rainfall as well. As this storm system wraps up, I'm not going to be able to show you snow, but there will be snow on the back end here as this loses tropical characteristics. Here's the GFS model from this morning. You see two low pressure systems pulling away north of Bermuda here by this evening. This low deepens, pressure drops into the 980s here, so it strengthens some, but it is not tropical. Even 970s here, which would be pretty similar to Lee's intensity. And oh, by the way, with our front here, we do see snow across northern parts of Ontario into southwest Quebec. And we may actually see a little bit of snow out of this here in the higher elevations here of West Virginia by the end of this weekend. So a very complicated storm system to track, but I want you guys to focus on a few things. Number one, both low pressure systems kind of combine, and the deepest low pressure looks like it's moving into the Gulf of Maine here late tomorrow night, early Sunday morning. The other feature to watch is this front slowing down over western New England and New York State. And then we see colder air flooding in behind it with lake effects, rain showers, and heavier snow amounts, mainly wet snow here over parts of Canada. You can see the winds with Philippe here are going to mainly pass just east of Bermuda. This is 2 o'clock this afternoon. Wind gusts or wind speeds of 42 knots are being predicted on the eastern side of the island. It's about 48, 49 miles per hour. So we are going to see tropical storm conditions on Bermuda here this morning into the early afternoon, and then some gradual weakening of those winds as they pull away here later this afternoon. This is 5 o'clock, and you can see winds have already died down here in Bermuda. As the storm lifts away, it tries to look like a tropical system, at least from a wind standpoint. It won't from a satellite standpoint. Let me give you miles per hour, but you can see winds in miles per hour well northeast of the center, could be over 60 miles per hour. Keep an eye on these in Nova Scotia as this storm gets closer to you here tomorrow night. We'll see winds very quickly ramping up on the south coast here with gusts potentially over 60 miles per hour. Sustained winds though 30 to 40. So the angle that everything is hitting from the southeast could bring in some rough surf here all the way to Halifax, as well as across the Bay of Fundy here by the time we get into the early morning hours on Sunday. And then we'll see mainly water winds are going to be 50 miles per hour or so, but the actual circulation kind of moves right over eastern Maine, western New Brunswick here early in the day on Sunday. Here's a look at rain totals from the NAM in just the next 60 hours, and you can see that potential for flooding around Acadia National Park, Bar Harbor, up into central Maine here. Amounts of 3 to 4 inches are expected according to the NAM model. Lesser amounts over the U.S.-Canadian border. Amounts will be generally an inch or two, so about 40, 50 millimeters or so of rain for Canada. And we could see some heavier amounts here in Nova Scotia. My map doesn't get out that far. The NAM doesn't really run for Canada. You can also see this other area coming up right on through the Hudson Valley into the Montreal area. Amounts could be between 2 and 4 inches, and a lot of that in a short amount of time. So we could be dealing with more flash flooding, some of the same areas that have seen it recently. Here's a look closer in at the NAM model, and you can see rain today in New York isn't going to be super heavy, but this evening we could see localized pockets of 1 to 2 inches of rain, maybe in parts of Rockland and Orange counties and Westchester counties here up to Poughkeepsie. And then overnight tonight and early tomorrow morning, if you are planning something this weekend in New York City, we may see very heavy amounts of rain coming down. It may only be a couple of inches, which is less than what we dealt with, of course, last Thursday and Friday. But you can see here in Manhattan, we're looking at 3 inches of rain according to the NAM. Poughkeepsie, 3 to 4 inches. Some areas here of the Catskills over 5 inches of rain, and a lot of this coming in a 12-hour stretch. So the flash flood threat is again elevated here, even back into Nepa here, 1 to 2 inches of rain into central New York around Binghamton, 2 or 3 inches of rain. So while eastern New England should be okay, we are definitely looking at the threat for very heavy rain around New York City once again. And we all know that that does not lead to desired results here, unfortunately. Looking at Maine here, on the NAM model, you can see 2 to 3 inches around Bangor. Down the Bar Harbor, 4 to 5 inches of rain is possible. And Caribou and Presque Isle are just looking at about an inch or so. So it looks like even though the low may come by east of this area, the heavy rain band is going to shift off to your west. There could be a lull in here where we don't see a lot of rain around Quebec City and on down into New Hampshire and eastern Vermont. But on both sides of this, we see very heavy amounts of rain expected here. Winds from the NAM, we're looking at wind gusts of 60 to maybe 70 miles per hour in the offshore waters here, the Gulf of Maine, and in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. In kilometers per hour, that gets you gusts between 80 and 120 kilometers per hour near Yarmouth. And as we move those winds inland into New Brunswick, 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, potentially more. And over the Gaspé Peninsula into Quebec, we could see wind gusts of 80 to 100 kilometers per hour as well, depending on the GFS model and its exact track. Here's the Eastern Atlantic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you can see wind shear will impact this wave and keep it from developing. But we do have an envelope of moisture here coming off of the African coast that could slowly develop. If you look at the GFS model, you see nothing really organized until maybe early next week when a depression could form on Monday. And the GFS does take it off to the races. I think it's going to end up being a little bit too strong with this, but you can see tropical storm here by Tuesday night and Wednesday, maybe close to hurricane strength. We'll have to see about that. I'm not quite sold on that particular outcome, but you see the storm is turning away to the right, at least until Friday, and then high pressure builds in, and it may actually try to turn the system back to the left, but it's weakening at that point. And I don't think it's a threat to Bermuda. I think it's just going to get stuck out in here, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. This is the 20th of October. Gosh, I mean, that's 2 weeks out. A lot can still change. The good news is that we don't see anything organizing outside of this system for the rest of the next 2 weeks in at least the Atlantic side of the tropics. Here's a look at the ensembles just to give you an idea of this possible track. All of them are taking the system northwest, which is great news here for the Caribbean. In that we're not expecting anything to form closer to these islands. We do have this system in the Pacific we need to watch. It could bring a non-tropical low across the western and northern Gulf here later into the week, and that's going to bring heavy rain into the eastern United States, especially the southeast. But right now, no tropical threats for the Caribbean and no tropical threats really for the Gulf. I just don't think this is going to be tropical by the time it gets into here, but we'll keep an eye on it. But nothing really to be too concerned with after Philippe moves away here in the next 10 days, according to the European. Not really worried about this area here. It's not going to develop. Lydia, though, up to 70 miles per hour. Should be a hurricane here by tonight. And then we have a higher chance of organization here with EP99. That's an area of disorganized showers and storms off to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec in here. And that could be a tropical storm max. But it's going to be kind of slow to evolve. You can see there's not really a well-organized circulation with it. Lydia is actually kind of impacting Max here, future Max, and keeping it from strengthening. Here is Lydia, a pretty well-organized system, strong winds up to 70 miles per hour. Why do we care? Well, all of our models say it's going to hit a certain level where it's going to try to make a turn right back to the right. And Mexico could be under the gun here with a tropical system, maybe a tropical storm or low-end hurricane, perhaps impacting the Baja here later next week or coming up into the Gulf of California or hitting west central and northwestern Mexico. And all that moisture is going to come into the southwestern U.S. at some point. We have a trough that's going to draw that moisture northeastward, and so some rain will be impacting Texas and into the western Gulf. You can see that on the GFS. It strengthens the storm and then begins to weaken it as it turns back. The GFS tries to keep it a hurricane close to Cabo San Lucas here next Tuesday night. Here's Max developing, and we see just a ton of moisture getting drawn northward here across Mexico. I don't know how this is going to play out yet. The GFS has shown us different looks, but what you can see is the trough pulling that moisture northward does bring heavier rains up into Texas, Louisiana, and the central Gulf states here later next week. And that could impact parts of the eastern United States as well here, with this front moving in next Friday and drawing heavy moisture up the East Coast Friday night into Saturday. So once again, We're talking about very wet weather Friday and early Saturday in the eastern United States. 3 weeks in a row, we're on a streak here at this point. So keep an eye on things there. In the Western Pacific, we are still dealing with strong Typhoon Koinu. It's a smaller storm after coming off of Taiwan, but it's actually strengthening some. Here's South China, and it's going to scrape the coast here. You can see on the visible growing circulation center, pretty good looking eye, Category 3 storm. It is gradually going to weaken as it scrapes the coast and moves into Hainan as a tropical storm. So lots of rain coming for places like Hong Kong, Macau, and the Guangdong coastline here of China here in the next few days, while Taiwan has a lot of cleaning up to do from this powerful storm. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday. I'm going to catch up with you again tomorrow morning, a little bit later in the morning, but thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I really hope you did and you got a lot out of it, and please consider becoming a subscriber. If you are a subscriber, we do have the option for you to become a member at $9.99 a month, 33 cents a day. Not a lot of money if you want to help support me. You are the folks that I'm going to turn to first here when you have any questions for me and need any forecasts. I'm happy to provide those for you as a meteorologist. And I just thank you for your time today. I give all the glory to God. I thank him for every day. It is a blessing for me. This is a calling of mine. I have a lot of passion in being able to help folks out with the weather. And I do believe that God has put me on earth to do this as a Christian man. I'm going to say this is one of my favorite verses from Psalm 118, 24. This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Every day is a blessing, folks. I think you understand that, no matter if you believe in God or not. But if you do believe in God, obviously you can see that he has created us all to be glad and to have joy. There are days where I struggle when I wake up and maybe I have not gotten a lot of rest or I'm not feeling well. I'm sure everybody here goes through that. I know some of you have some chronic illnesses, and trust me, I'm praying for you to be healthy. But I do think that this really is a blessing. It's a day for us to go out and make a difference and bless other people. You have the option to kind of hate life and just be miserable. And I've been there. Before I became a Christian, I think every day was like that for me, where I was like, man, I'm dying here. I'm dying and I don't know, just take me. But I will honestly say that when David sings this psalm, he really does remind us that the Lord has created us and created every day, and it is a blessing, and we have that option to have the joy and be glad that God created us, because one day we're not going to be here on earth, and God so loved the world that he did bring his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross, to rise again, and to give us eternal life if we so choose to have the joy in God that we have had those sins taken from us, and we've been given grace from God that we can live eternally with him in heaven. And that is why I am full of joy, knowing that one day I'm not going to have the blessing of being here on earth, but I'm going to have the bigger blessing that is being in the kingdom of God with Jesus Christ. I pray that you have that belief, because I really do think that that belief is what's going to drive you to go out and feel blessed every day and to feel the joy that God gives us. It is a difficult world to be in, but we have that straight and narrow path where we can stay on the course, to stay in God's word, to stay in the joy that God has created us in. And it's a tough path to take, because we're going to continue to have storms of life hitting us on both sides. But having that joy is really the reason that I found God, seeing people that had joy, because I was around people who didn't for a long time. They're wonderful people. A lot of them have ended up hurting me, but they're hurting people, and hurt people, right? However, I know that I operate in forgiveness. I've forgiven them for their sins against me. I've kind of moved on. I've got other people that I stick with now, but I really do see the joy every day, waking up, being able to go out and make a difference and be a blessing to other folks. I pray that that's the situation that you're in. If it's not, I would love to pray for you right now. Please list those prayer requests, and not only will I pray for you, I'll have my family and my Christian brothers and sisters praying for you as well. I hope you all have a great Friday. Please be safe in Atlantic Canada and Maine here and in the Northeast. And I'll catch up with you all again tomorrow morning. Take care.